Good evening, everyone. This is a call to the order for the Policy Committee meeting for Wednesday, January the 8th at 5:30 p.m. Mrs. Shope, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Tom Hankins.
Here.
Amy Levy is unable to make it this evening, and Brian Nichols.
Here.
All members are present, except Amy Levy. Thank you.
Wait a minute.
Thank you. Could I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
And I will second in Amy's absence. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agenda approved. Could I get an approval of the minutes for November the 6th?
So moved.
I second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. First item on the agenda is Policy 345.6, graduation requirements. And Mrs. Mortek, thank you for being here and your team. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. So we have a mini set of policies, and then we'll be coming back to finish the complete set in the coming months with the end of the school year coming. I'm going to show you the presentation that we had planned back in October when we first came to the policy committee to go through that. We did also go back to the TLE committee. 2 out of 3 of those committee members supported our changes in completion. Mr. Hankins has remained consistent with concerns with the change in 26 to 24 credits. There are other changes, though, in the policy that I would like to get to this evening. So hopefully our conversation won't just rest in the number of credits required, because there are changes that were made at the state level. So in order for us to be in alignment, we updated the policy, which informs the master scheduling process going forward for students. So I will show the presentation. Okay, so why the changes? We had to be in alignment with the updates made in state requirements, to be more in alignment with high-performing school districts across the state. We looked at top-performing school districts to see what their number of required credits were. And then the last part was to continue to offer a well-rounded education to students and allow opportunities to earn beyond the minimum requirements that the state has, and opportunities to be recognized for academic excellence. So we looked at schools, the largest school districts in the state. We looked at our highest performing districts in the state, and then we looked at districts around Rock County to look at the number of credits that they were requiring. So currently we are requiring 26, so our recommendation based off of all of these other school districts was to move to 24. Then what we did when you go into the policy a little bit deeper, we wanted our students in alignment with our academy structure to be recognized for academic excellence. So currently with the recommendation, again, of a minimum of 24, or if we stay at 26, they would be a graduate at the end as seniors, or they could graduate with honors if they have those additional requirements, or we would recognize a graduate with honors distinction should they have those additional accomplishments during the ceremony. And then some other considerations that we were looking at is just with those minimum requirements, that changing the minimum requirements does not prevent students from seeking the maximum credits, which is 32 credits. The change does not change the core requirements from the state. It's only our number of electives that we are requiring students to do. Changing from the 26 down to the 24 will allow more students to participate in work-based learning opportunities, which is definitely a point of pride in our district. We outpace the state, still approximately 3-1, and that's a lot of the work that we're doing as our initiative and focus has been in building academies for earned credit and college career and community ready. And then also improving our 4-year graduation rate. Is another one. We are really working towards changing our system of getting out of the mindset of credit recovery being a fallback and really pressing on students to take courses and pass them the first time in their class, classes. And so that's another piece of that we've been talking about as an administrative group. We have some of our administrators here today that have worked in collaboration on this policy. So that's the presentation, and then the meat of the changes are obviously in the edits that are found in the uploads.
Are there any questions? Board Member Hankins?
Yeah, a few. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I heard you say was, I'm concerned, obviously I'm concerned about lowering it. I think you're trying to sell it on that a student has more flexibility in taking different varying classes other than core classes, but I thought I also heard you say that this does not affect core classes. Going from 26 to 24, they still have to maintain, is that true?
Yeah, what we're removing is the number of required elected courses. I'm sorry if I misspoke there.
No, I'm just.
So they're still required to take the core amount that the state requires. We right now require students to take more electives. So the reduction from 24 to 26 is reducing the required amount of electives, which is beyond what the state suggests.
Okay, then I thought I heard you say that would give them more flexibility in taking these elective classes.
It gives them flexibility because they can stay all the way up to 32 credits. So this change doesn't change the opportunity to take 32 credits.
No.
No. What it does is it gives them more flexibility to have work-based learning opportunities, or it gives students the opportunity, if they're ready to graduate and move on, to not have to stick around and take additional electives.
Explain that what do you mean stick around? If they have completed, you mean they have to take 2 more electives? Is that what you're talking about?
Currently, yeah. With someone else in the group, maybe one of the administrators, could you explain the difference in the electives?
And what is the core class requirement as units?
Sure. So if you look at the policy, the way it's written in the draft, it has what the requirements are by the state. So it's 4 credits of English, 3 credits of social studies, 3 credits of science, 3 credits of math, a 0.5 of personal finance, and 1.5 of FIAD.
Equals?
Half of health. Thank you.
Equals how many total?
15, thank you.
So 15, and they're required to have, at this point, 26 credits to graduate, right?
Correct.
So they're already getting, okay. When you say to get us more in alignment with the state, what does that mean?
Sure. So in the presentation, there was a link where it talked about some of the changes that have been happening. So for example, in the future, we may be able to substitute a CTE course for a math credit. And there are some other changes like that that were suggested, the way in which we were doing and recognizing math credits, those types of things.
There's also, can I just,
Please.
yeah, so it also, the guidance from DPI says, the state superintendent encourages school boards to require an additional 8.5 credits in combination for vocational ed, world languages, fine arts, and other courses. So that's the electives. They're recommending 8.5 credits, and currently we require more than that.
Okay. But she's not saying, we wouldn't mind if you have more than that. Okay. That's it. Sorry.
Okay.
Would you like to go first? Do you have some?
Oh, I've got a question.
Okay. No, board member president, please.
Thanks.
President, please carry on.
So 32 is the maximum possible. That's just during the regular two-semester year. They could get all, if they took a class, every single class period, they would have 32?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I know sometimes in the past, there were students that would take classes during summer school to get the extra credits to try to graduate early, and I didn't know if that was something that students still do or not. Thanks.
We don't have an early graduation. Well, technically, students could graduate early. Technically, students could graduate early. Let me correct myself. Correct. When I'm thinking about like you said 32, it's 32 over 4 years. Of course, yeah. Yeah. Up to 32 over the course of 4 years. I just want to make sure I note that.
Yeah, or in lieu of having to take it during the regular school year. And we only offer it in the summer when we have a licensed person to do it. So we haven't offered it every summer that I've been here.
And on average, students in the district earn
Which begs the question, why change it?
Okay, well, now it's my turn. So let's go to the spreadsheet that you presented. I guess that's page, what, 2 or 3? 3. And I appreciate the data that you put together on the, do you want to put that back up on the screen? Mrs. Moratak? Okay, thank you. That one, thank you. Okay, so, you know, I appreciate the largest public schools and the highest performing public schools, but I guess I'm more focused on Beloit and Rock County. So if you did not include the Lincoln Academy, which is a part of our network, in this county. It's a public charter school, right?
Yeah, I could have put that on there. I was thinking about public school systems. I wasn't thinking about one charter school in our city.
Okay. Well, I'm not
That's
focused
fine.
on that. It's just one.
Okay.
So, so they're at 26. So the average in Rock County is 25.5 hours, and we're at 26. So I would tend to agree with Board Member Hankins. Is why would we change it if if we've got a lot of students that are getting 30 credits and all that, and it gives them the opportunity to take more elective classes. They might find that elective class that they could take instead of in those extra 2 credits could be a career decision for them ultimately. Is that correct? Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, I've brought this policy and we've gone around and around about this. I've taken it to another committee. Those 2 out of 3 board members supported the change, and I'm back here again. So I started this conversation tonight to say that I didn't want to get hung up on this because there are other edits in this. So if you and Mr. Hankins are still concrete that you want to keep it 26, Ms. Levy shared her thoughts that she is in support of the change. If it will not get out of the policy committee because the 2 of you are solid on 26, I'm okay with that because there are other changes in these other policies that I need to get to because we are not in alignment to the state.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Well, I personally am firm as a member of the policy committee. I'm firm on 26 also. I think I think it feels like we're going backwards, and we don't. There's that's the, and I can tell you, I would be almost sure if we shared share this with the community, we're going to get this. We're going to get the same
Okay.
comments.
I respectfully and professionally disagree,
That's
but that's another way for you to look at it, and I think we should just move forward on the other changes because we will have another board at another time.
sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Want to go through the other changes?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So, So in 345-6, is there any other changes? So we're going to leave 20, we're going to leave that at 26. I think that would, I believe that would change, would that not change the second paragraph, except? We would not change that?
So for number 1, having passed grades and all that are required, we would keep that at 26, Michelle Shope.
Yes.
And then we would add at the bottom recommendation beginning with the class of 25, 26. So if we're going to keep it at 24, we can strike beginning with the class of 25, 26 because there's no need to make that change.
That's, okay, very good.
Yep.
Bullet point 2 is okay.
Correct?
Bullet 3 is correct with the change. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We are just using the
They.
they.
They,
Correct.
And then the next paragraph.
We are striking that out.
Okay. You still want to strike that?
Correct?
Okay. All right. Next paragraph's fine. What about the last the next to the last paragraph?
Yep, those are my recommendations, so I'm good as they stand.
Okay.
I will note that Ms. Levy suggested that we collapse all three of the policies, Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3, and run them all together, which I am open to that change. If you are, Chair Nichols, we would just have to change those edits with Ms. Shope.
I would, I'm different.
Okay.
I believe we should keep them separate.
As Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule
Yeah,
3.
Yeah, because.
Okay.
For me, in looking up policies, it's easier to look up, because it's titled different than the one big
Okay.
policy. So,
It doesn't make a big difference to me personally.
okay. And then the last sentence refers to Rule 2. Do we need to strike that?
No, we added that in green.
Yeah, I know.
So we wanted to keep that because
Okay.
they have to get that in time to apply for completion.
Okay. Mrs. Shope, did you get all that? Okay, thank you.
Question, Mr. Nichols.
Yes, sir.
When we think about and I needed the discussion to happen because the recommendations that are coming to the board are, number one, vetted through my office, and of course we move those conversations forward accordingly. The 26 to the 24, I know you asked us to go to the Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee. They said they were fine. Or to the Policy Committee, we're not fine with that, with the 26, 24. So what was the rationale of going back to the Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee?
As I stated at that time, it seemed like that's where it should have started in the first place. So that hasn't changed. So I don't know that there's really any reason to go over that again.
So I disagree because if it went there, is it the charge of the Policy Committee for it to stay there and then it moved to the full board? That wasn't the charge. I didn't think that was the charge. That's why we had to come back here. And so that's where the disconnect is, because if we go to another committee and the committee there is fine with it, do we then, is it a policy that we say then it goes back to the full board because coming back here, it then stopped? You see what I'm saying? So, ma'am,
I did email the board about that for clarifying how we were going to go forward because, for example, the policy committee has handled finance policy here like they are tonight, but those were not asked to start in the finance committee. So there's an inconsistency of practice, and I did email and ask for clarification, which I did not receive.
Okay, my apologies for that.
No worries.
So, this is kind of a wholesale change of the program to me. We're changing graduation requirements, so that's a big deal. And we're talking about the area that we need to really improve in, which is academic achievement. So I can't put words in Board Member Hankins' mouth, and I refuse to do that. But in my mind, I think we need to give our children the opportunity to get more exposure than less in high school.
And again, I don't disagree with that. I think sometimes we associate credits with achievement, and that's where the disconnect comes in at oftentimes in this conversation. I just wanted to make sure from a clarity perspective that, as we move these conversations through different committees, that we want to be consistent, and we also want to do what the board is asking me. I got to follow those procedures as well. But it passed there, it came back here. It didn't pass here. Well, based off of where we are, we haven't voted on it yet. We still got to do that part. It seems as if when we sent it there, those voices there maybe, and I think maybe like a policy as such, for clarity perspective, maybe we should have brought it, maybe I should have brought it to the full board. But then again, that's why we have the policy committee. So it's just one of those things where we have to make sure we work out so that the clarity is there, so that we won't, I don't want to disrespect another committee and their work, and then bring it back here, and then that, you know, then there's that space as well. So I just wanted to make sure I brought that as a note, because that's something that may come up as we continue to review more and more policies. If it goes to a committee, if the policy committee asks it to go to a committee, and that committee votes it up, then maybe we should bring that up to the full board. And then the board can take it off the consent agenda, vote on it as a whole, and then move on like we would normally do anyway. As a suggestion. Because again, for it to go, come back, go, yes, come back, no, it's like the other board, other committee, I should say. We're not recognizing that, well, we're not recognizing that space that took place last month. So I just want to make sure I note that as the district administrator.
I would also note that the inconsistency has set us back 4 months. I intentionally brought this to the board in October because I knew that we were starting the master scheduling in the high school. And because I've sat here now 4 times for a first reading, it has pushed us into January, and the high school has already started their master scheduling. So I ask out of respect of the time and the work of the staff, because this is now another night that our administrators are sitting here to discuss this policy, that we have more consistency and practice in valuing people's time and work.
Okay, let's go back to 345-6. So could I get a motion to move the recommendations to the full board with the addition, with the changes that we have made, that Mrs. Shope has made?
So you are suggesting, or
We're
may I?
going to do, yep, yeah, we're going to do, well, we're going to do one policy at a time.
Okay.
So
you're
345-6 was the first one, the one we just went through, correct?
That's correct.
Right, so we're going to, you know, request, I need a motion to move the changes to the Board of Education for policy 345-6.
So
As we-
345-6, with the changes of the
This committee.
26 credits remaining,
Yes,
and striking the beginning with the class of, and then all of the other changes remaining.
correct.
Mr. Hankins?
So moved. I know we're going to probably discuss then, the other changes. Thank you.
I second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
I thought we might have a discussion first.
That's okay. Okay, yes.
Okay. For this layman, the other changes, and I know we struck this and added this in the verbiage. What, maybe Ms. Moratek, you could explain what now remains in place that we are changing for, on a thumbnail sketch for me, please?
Are we still with the first policy, or are we on the next one? I'm sorry, I'm lost.
We're on 345-6.
Okay, so we haven't moved that forward yet.
Oh.
That's what we're voting on. to move this
Okay.
forward.
So-
I'm sorry. So we're on the 26 to
345-6, the
24.
first-
We're still on what we just went over.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But not any other changes, just.
That is correct.
26, 24. Okay. I'm ready to vote.
All those in favor say aye.
Pass. I'm not sure. I meaning
You-
change or not change?
If I, so the.
Just a clarification. I'm sorry.
So if I'm understanding where we are, you guys, the motion right now is for the 345.6, this one, leaving the credits at 26.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried, 2-0. Okay, now we're moving on to 345-6, Rule 1.
Thank you, that's correct.
Okay. So we're going to make the change on A to 20, back to 26. And Mrs. Mortek, what other changes?
Sure, so then in green where it says beginning with the class of 25, 26, we'll strike that.
Like that, yeah. Okay,
We will leave credits earned shall be in accordance with state and policy statute.
okay,
And then moving on to the different content areas, anything in green, we've added.
Right.
Anything with a line through it, we've struck out.
okay. All righty, just want to make sure, I don't want to miss anything.
Correct, and then, thank you, good catch, Ms. Gorud. So on the back of it,
Mm-hmm.
this, where it says college and career readiness and elective courses.
Yes.
We will need to change that from back to 10 instead of 8.5.
Okay.
That was where the reduction was coming from.
Right,
So we need to move it back to requiring kids 10 electives to graduate instead of 8.5. 10 and a half, excuse me,
10.5,
10.5 instead of 8.5.
okay. That's where we picked up the two.
That is what I was trying to explain,
Yeah,
that's
gotcha.
correct.
Okay. Okay, aside from that, everything else. Are there any other changes that,
Yeah, we'll need to adjust.
The last Part D,
okay?
so Michelle
26.
show in Part D where we have the 24 minimum requirements earned, it'll have to all change the 24s back to 26s.
Right,
I do have another question.
Sure.
So where the college and career readiness and elective courses is going back to the 10.
10.5.
10.5.
I want the verbiage in the box to change because it says students must attend 11.5 and 8 elective. I want it just changed to 10 elective.
Correct.
Okay.
So in the first box where it says 8.5, you're going to change that to 10.5. And then when we break it down, it stays the .5 college and career ready course. And then that 8 is the 10. Thank you for your clarification. That's correct.
right, but the half stays there, right?
Yes, sir.
Correct,
The 10 plus the .5 is the 10.5.
right.
Yep.
And did you get the items in D, Mrs. Shope?
Yes.
Okay.
I did have a clarifying question with my colleague, Tony Bosco, on 3E, where we have the examination to meet the requirements for a particular course. We wanted to strike out that the principal should be the sole determiner of the credits, but do we want to put back in the examination? Okay, I'll explain it to you, reason why.
Sure.
So Michelle, where it says examination to meet requirements for a particular course, we want to keep that in the verbiage. We're on the second page,
A3.
3E.
3E.
Is that it?
The reason why is because we're looking at, in our dual language, a proficiency assessment that students could take that would allow them then to like skip a language course at the high school level. In the statute, you have to identify that and build out a process, but we don't want to strike it totally out of the policy yet until we build out the process, because otherwise we have to come back to the board. And it was written in here before, but nothing was really done with it. It was just sort of sitting there. And so in our deeper conversations about students' proficiencies in like Spanish, for example, how they could earn credit then with an examination.
Okay,
So that's why we're leaving it.
okay.
And that also applies to some AP tests also.
Oh, yes, and some AP tests. That's
Okay.
right.
I have a quick question on, in
Yes.
C, is that okay, the 60 60 students who have students who must correctly answer at least 65 questions. Is that still correct? Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to verify.
Thank you for asking, yes.
Okay. That takes care of it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, could I get a, is there a motion to move the 345.6 Rule 1 to the full board for first reading with the changes that we have, Mrs. Shope has noted?
So moved.
I'll second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay. 345.6 Rule 2. Do you want to change graduation to completion, or do you want to leave it at graduation?
Yeah, it's a little bit of wordsmithing, but it helps to clarify that students can complete early, but they are not fully graduated until the day of the ceremony, and then they're a graduate. So it just is more accurate in its wording. And that's why the word completion is found throughout this policy in lieu of the word graduation.
Okay.
Mr. Can I ask a question?
Yes, Dr. Garrison.
And this is what I was referring to. I know when I said earlier that we don't have a early graduation. We don't have an early graduation. So I don't want people to
Right.
think I was just crazy by stating that, because I wasn't. Because I've never seen one since I've been here. I think that's just something I just want to mention.
We have early completers, and they do finish. It's just that then the full-fledged graduation is at the ceremony.
Correct. We do not
Yes.
have early graduation.
You are correct.
Correct. Thank you.
Saturday in June. Right. Okay. Okay. Items 1C, is that still okay? Do you need to leave it at 7? Or do
We will be striking that.
Okay. We're going to leave it, we're going to strike C, period?
1C, yes.
Yes, okay. Did you get that, Mrs. Shope? Yes. Okay. Items 2A,
Strike.
okay. And completion, what about 2D? Do you want to move that back to principal, or are you going to leave?
We're striking principal and going with school administrator.
Okay. Early completers, class rank,
So it will be, class rank will be determined upon graduation.
will be,
And we're striking all of the other stuff.
okay. Okay. Mrs. Shope, did you get that? Yes. Okay. I hope you don't mind me continuing to ask. I just think it might be easier if we really get at the back and go all the way back, so. Okay. So that is 345-6 Rule 2. Could I get a motion to move this back to the full board, move it to the full board with the additions and deletions as noted by Mrs. Shope?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, moving on to 2D, Rule 3, which is 345-6, Rule 3, excuse me. So how do we need to change?
Sure. So it will, in that first paragraph, it will now read, "A student who meets all of the following requirements we've added will be exempt from the .5 credit in physical education for the purposes of high school graduation in accordance with the state statute." So we are now in alignment with the state
Okay,
statute.
so
And
that, as
Suggested that it
suggested is
remains
correct.
the same.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Just wanted to double check.
Sure,
Okay, and then bullet point number 3,
as is.
as is, okay. Bullet point 4,
As is?
okay. And the next paragraph,
Yeah, that's not necessary.
it's not necessary, okay. And there is a note down there that we need to remove his, her, okay, got that, okay. And the assistant principal for athletics and activities, leave that? Or
We're crossing off assistant principal athletics because we just simply have an athletic director.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's the title change, I think, at
Right,
some point.
okay. All right, that's good. Michelle? No. Michelle, you good on that? Okay. All right, so we get a motion on 345 rules, .6 Rule 3 to move to the full board with the changes that we've discussed.
So moved.
Hi, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, 345.61, you recommend no changes.
Yeah, I did want to add in, if you don't mind, just crossing off that last sentence, there shall be no formal graduation exercises. Miss Levy had asked for clarification. I don't disagree because she said, sometimes people want to do like a 4K bridge and an 8th grade bridge. So maybe we just get rid of that whole last sentence and then it just, if people want to do their informal things in those buildings, and this just sticks to what a formal graduation ceremony is in that top part.
Okay.
I just felt like it simplified it.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Board Member Hankins?
Yes, so Mr. Mortek, you're just suggesting we eliminate that last line?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it just makes things
I agree.
more confusing than trying to be clear,
Yep.
which is what I think their original intent was.
I would agree.
Okay.
Okay. So could I get a motion to move 345.61 to the full board for approval with that one change?
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 2-0. And as you so aptly noted, 345.62 and .63 have never been used to represent policy in the last 26 years, so I don't know what to say. I wasn't here.
Me neither.
I don't think anybody in this room was here then. Okay. Okay. 345.64,
Miss Levy did suggest that we change the number on that then to be in alignment of the policies in order because those other two are like mute. Do it. So I don't know, I'm fine with that.
oh,
Because then it's more in order.
yeah, that's a good point.
It's not a question of like, where are the other two?
Okay.
Does that make sense to you, Ms. Schout?
It does, and if I could have 30 seconds to catch up, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, we're moving
Okay,
too
thank
quickly
you.
now.
So,
No, I'm gonna let them do it.
Yes, Board President Johnson.
Chair Nichols, so then 345.64 will become what number?
345.6.62.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, am I correct that the only revision to the posthumous diplomas is the number change?
Is the number correct?
Okay, thank
Right.
you.
We did have a recommendation, I'm sorry, Mr. Nichols, it was a miss on our behalf. So do you see that bullet where it says the student must be enrolled in Beloit Memorial High School or Beloit Learning Academy? We have students that are enrolled in virtual school and other programs. So do we just say that the student must be enrolled within the school district of Beloit at the time of death? And then they would get that diploma?
Well, they wouldn't get a diploma if they were in the 6th grade. Right?
Right.
But would they get a diploma if they're a freshman? Because according to your policy, they do now.
Right. That's the idea.
Yeah. Sure.
So I
Dr.
think-
Garrison?
Yeah, sure. I think in a lot of, in these situations, we just really want to honor the families
Absolutely. Yes.
that's going through this bereavement. And since I've been in schools, even here in Beloit, there has been a timely passing of a student.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about this specific,
It's like we have Challenge Academy students, Fresh Start students,
and
and it doesn't say that in this policy,
I
so.
think for me, when I read it, the student must be enrolled in the Beloit Memorial or Beloit Learning Academy. If they are part of our virtual program, they are in BLA. I mean that
It is under the umbrella of the
Uh,
BLA Academy. That is true. Yes, that's a good point, Dr. Garrison.
So I wasn't trying to. I thought it was fine the way it is. That's the thought you just brought in the room. But I want to honor your space too. But I think we should leave it.
Because our understanding is in Beloit Academy, we have a lot of programming underneath that umbrella. So all of those are programs that I listed, so a family would receive them because they are a part of the Beloit Learning Academy.
That's correct. There are none.
Okay, that makes, now that we've talked that through, does that sound good to you, Mr. Steners?
Yeah, and also address your point, Board Member Nichols, of somebody in the 6th grade, if they're in Beloit Memorial High School or Beloit Learning Academy, they are a high school
Yeah,
student.
right. Gotcha,
regardless.
gotcha.
I just want to make sure
Right,
we're
right.
missing students in those other programs.
Correct.
By looking at BLA only physical building, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Well, and also, Board Member Levy made a suggestion that we change the first sentence to read, upon the request of a student's parent, which we have, / guardian of the relative if the student is unaccompanied, a high school diploma may be awarded possibly. So I think that's a good addition.
Agreed?
Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So, Michelle, did you get Board Member Levy's email?
I didn't, but it was forwarded to me.
Okay.
I can make that change.
Okay. Michelle, are you ready? Mrs. Shope, are you ready? Okay. So I need okay. Yes. Board Member Hankins.
Yeah, just clarification, I think this covers it when it says may be awarded. So it leaves some wiggle room, you know, I mean, the worst case scenario is someone to die on campus for some, you know, extenuating reasons why, some malfeasance of their own. It's a maybe.
So are you suggesting we change a may to a shall? Or we leave it
Well,
a
it says
may?
maybe, so I think that leaves that wiggle room. I'm just
Oh,
thinking.
you would like the wiggle room, yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Not, it says we have to. You know, I'm just thinking the 99.9999% is good, but, and I just want to jump back, Chairman Nichols, and I don't know if you're doing this, this motion, do we need to go back did we eliminate the two, Mrs. Mortek, and do we need to say that? The ones that haven't been used for 25 or 6, shouldn't that be a motion to eliminate those? No? But if we're pushing everything up, they just go into the hyperspace, those numbers?
I defer to the expert on policy numbering.
Those numbers were actually never used, and quite often this committee has asked, well, where's the policy that was represented by those numbers? So I looked back as far as 25 years and couldn't find where those two numbers were ever used. And so like we in the past have used the WASB guideline for numbering policies. And so if their guidelines said to number graduation exercises as the 0.61 and then posthumous diplomas as the 0.64, those two other numbers could have some other policy represented by them, but we've never had a policy for them. So that's why there's no need to delete them, because we haven't had a policy.
Thank
there.
you, and excuse me for,
Does that make sense?
yes, very much
Okay.
so.
So are we good to move forward? Okay. I need a motion to move policy 345.62, the new number, forward to the full board with the noted changes.
So moved.
I second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye. Pass 2-0. First of all, thank you all. I do appreciate the time that you guys spend, and I'm sorry that we drug you out. And I apologize for last month. 2 weeks in, anyway, personal health jumped in my way. So thank you. Appreciate what you do. Good night. Okay, now we're on to the 600 policies, 672 policies. So 672, no changes, Mr. Chady?
Correct, yeah, no changes to 672. We've read through that. We feel that that's appropriate as it is today, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Good, thank you. Michelle, I have a question on that for you. Will we just do a review date? That's what you would just review today date? Do we need to do a motion on that? And no, I didn't think so. Okay. So you will just change the last review date to January 8th, 2025. Whoa. Hello. Okay. Okay, 672.2, the only thing you changed was the, to delete human resources and operations from how, on second sentence, correct?
672.2 local purchasing.
Yes. The old policy had, however, on the second sentence, however, the executive director of business comma, human resource as,
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. What's posted in board docs doesn't reflect that change, but I do recall that.
yeah,
Trying to think back to
Okay.
the work that we did for
Yeah.
November. Yep. Just updating that title was all.
okay.
Yep.
And
Yes.
that's considered a minor change that was given permission to do by the
Oh,
committee.
okay, not-
So that's
so-
why it wasn't highlighted or anything.
Okay.
Right.
So we don't need to vote on it, okay.
I have a question, though.
Okay.
When I'm looking at the policies and I see last reviewed, and I know we had conversations about this, is there a policy, Michelle, because I just need to know this for myself, is there a policy that speaks to how often we're going to review policies? Is it two?
Yes. There's a policy that says that we're supposed to totally review every policy, and I believe it's every 3 years.
I can do
And that's like according to the master
All right.
policy, with the master policy log or whatever, and that's in the
Good.
100,
Okay.
Season going.
I think, for the policy committee function
That's what practice is for.
in their
But when they-
policy.
Sure, but when they fall into.
But I don't know that we've ever made it through every policy
Yeah, and I
in
know
3
it's-
years.
I know. And I
I mean,
think that's where.
we've tried really hard,
struggling.
starting when
Do what y'all
Dan
want.
Keiser was here, and we've started going through in chunks, but we
Can't
haven't made it in 3 years.
And the
but
reason why I'm bringing it up is because I know that's something that my administration is not currently able to, I'm putting it out there, accomplish. We can't go through 900 policies and. Correct. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware at the policy committee that I am thinking about that I know we are not able to, meet that threshold. So we'll continue to do the best we can, but I want you all to know that, because I'm fully
If I may,
transparent. Yeah.
I would just say we are in the last 3 to 4 years reviewing policy at a much better rate than it was being reviewed 10 years ago.
Sure.
So,
Thank you.
Okay, that's good to hear. We'll try to keep it going here. Sorry for the delays. Okay, so 672-4 vendor relations and 672-4 Rule 1 vendor relation guidelines, no changes? Either one of those?
Correct. I see no changes for either. I did read committee member Levy's suggestion about combining the two.
Oh,
I would encourage you to pause on that.
Yeah.
Instead of doing. So I'm accustomed in other districts where you have approved policies, school board policies, and then you have associated administrative rules that govern how the policy is adopted or implemented internally.
okay.
Can they be all the same? I suppose they could, but I've always been coached that less is more when it comes to policy instead of more is more. So your policies, you try to be succinct and to the point
Yeah,
without getting into this, the administrative rule component. But you're the policy committee and the
Well,
board, so.
So you're recommending that we keep them separate?
I would encourage the policy committee to reach out to the Wisconsin Association of School Board and speak to their policy team
Yeah,
about what the difference is between policies and rules, and get guidance from them. And I know that the district has collapsed rules into the associated policy in the past. Not saying it's right or wrong, but,
okay.
Context to that, too.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Garrison. Yeah.
So, little bit of context. That is true. Typically, there's admin guidelines that are associated with policies. In our district, however, we have these rules. And then when I had conversations with Ms. Shope, years ago when I first got here, like, what are these rules? We typically would see admin guidelines, and then of course policies like Mr. Chase is talking about. But here we have Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3, which has kind of almost sounded like our admin guidelines. And so I hear what Mr. Chady is stating. I understand what Mrs. Levy's point is, and I also understand where your space in this as well, Mr. Nichols. I think that's the dilemma of how we do policies in Beloit, because again, we have Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3, and a lot of times those rules sound and feel like admin guidelines versus policies. Now, the question that I had, in my, as I spent numerous hours on policies here, do we roll all of the rules into an admin guideline conversation? Now you have admin guidelines instead of rules, but again, that'll take a whole nother conversation with hundreds of different policies. And I think there's a bigger conversation that we probably need to have just as an agenda item here. We're talking about the Neola policy set, and having more people come to talk to us about policy and policy layout, because we do our policies different here in Beloit. It's not negative. That's not like a shot at anything or anyone or anything like that. It's just that from a consistency perspective, it's kind of hard to keep up with the many different changes that we are making, and like I said, collapsing versus not collapsing, rules versus admin guidelines. Yeah. I just want to make sure that if we were to do this thing full-fledged across all of the conversations, then we probably need to have a greater conversation around policies, policy layouts, as just an agenda item, not even thinking about looking at policies, because right now we're just we're humming through all of them. So just food for thought.
Well, I appreciate that. I took your advice, Bob. I wrote down WASB policy, and I'll check with them. But back like this one that we just talked about, 672.4 and 4 Rule 1, is part of the 672. So if you put it in 672, and I don't even, well, let's say 672.1. Let's say that's not a good. But just 672, then it would be a challenge finding if you had a question about vendor relations, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not saying what's right or wrong there. I just, most districts have the policies that are generally briefer, and then they have associated rules. Sometimes those rules are board approved, sometimes they're administratively crafted that then speak to how that policy is administered, and provides the guidance. Can it all be in one? Sure. Earlier in your agenda, I think your posthumous diploma, your change that policy number. Understand that, and that's, WASB's got a policy matrix with numbering. So the number that you're changing it to, 345.62 in the WASB, is graduation exercises. So now so efforts ought to be made to try to align with, not that we have to follow WASB's numbering system, but a lot of districts do. So when comparative purposes and just alignment, just something to think about is all. But yeah, I mean, your decision, right? Not mine. So what the committee and what the board decides to do, it's up to you. We'll administer it the best we can, however.
If you want just a hair more background.
Absolutely.
When I first started working with policy eons ago, Dick Peterson was our assistant superintendent of finance, and he took the entire 600 series and said, okay, what does the WASB Bible of numbering say? Right. And we went through and we renumbered all the policies in the 600 series to get them to align to that guidance book, because the numbers were all over the place. Like, people were just throwing numbers on them. And so we got it to align and follow that and make sense. And so since then, with me in the seat, I have done what I can to follow that. But as Mr. Chady just pointed out, some policies have been in existence for a long time, and so they don't follow that schedule. But if somebody says to me, hey, we've created a new policy and this is what it involves, what number do we give it? That's where I go and look up a number to give it. And so I've done my best to try to keep it in that numbering system. Now, in relation to what's policy and what's the rule or admin rule, I believe that all of our rules are technically admin rules,
Okay.
but again, not my call. But if you look at 672.4, the vendor relations, basically what's the policy is what you as board members are saying we need to do. And in that policy where it says vendor relation guidelines in policies 672.4 Rule 1, what that would say instead is vendor relation guidelines in administrative rule 672.4. And then there'd be an administrative rule on board docs, which we have set up that numbering, we just aren't really using it yet. So then the 672.4 Rule 1 would actually be Administrative Regulations 672.4, so you know it goes with that. Because basically what the rule is saying is, so here's how it works with the vendor, here's what employees need to know, here's the responsibilities of central office or COLAC, here's the responsibilities of the building principal, and here's the responsibilities of the teacher. So it's not necessarily what the board is saying it needs to do, it's more the guideline for everybody else in the district, which is why they're usually administrative regs. Now, that might not be the case for every single rule, but that one would definitely fall into an administrative reg in what I've been taught about policy. But again, like Mr. Chatty said, it's not up to us. That's got to be a big board decision.
Yeah, okay,
So,
wow. So, Mr. Chatty, I guess a question for you and your group, if you will, and specifically talking about finance stuff, does this create challenges and or real hardships along the way, or is it, you've been here a couple of years, well, Stephanie's not been here that long, but she's been here over a year now, right? I mean, for me, you seem like you have a really good grasp on the policy. So does it bring any challenges?
I don't think it brings challenges with regards to collapsing the rules into the policy. I mean, the language doesn't change.
Right.
Your policies have a tendency to then become more detailed. Sometimes it's nice to have some flexibility when it comes to reading the policy.
Okay.
And when you have more, then perhaps the flexibility becomes less.
So you want some gray areas?
Sometimes it makes sense, yes.
Okay. Well, I just, what was I thinking about?
Again, either way,
Okay.
and I've recognized over the past couple of years efforts to merge rules into policies. Maybe there just needs to be a little bit broader reflection on that before it's done, is all I'm saying. But,
Okay. Well, honestly, looking at this one, from me, again, this is me personally, vendor relations and vendor relations guidelines, I don't even see why there was ever a Rule 1. I would have thought that would have been vendor relations, and you could add and guidelines, and you've got the policy that you didn't even need the Rule 1. I don't know when the Rule 1 was developed. Back in the 90s. Probably, yes. I'm sorry.
just to point out, the very last sentence in the policy says, "The administration shall establish guidelines for implementing this policy." These guidelines shall specify areas of responsibility for the central office, the building principal, and teachers. So that's basically telling you that's the rule, and that the administration is going to establish those guidelines, which kind of tells you it should be an administrative reg,
Okay.
as opposed to a board policy.
Board policy. Okay.
I mean, that's, at least in my opinion, the way I'm reading that, that's what it's saying to me. But again, not my choice, not my decision.
Again, that's why I go back to say, like, they rolled in rules instead of admin guidelines, and in which this was something that was practiced long before all of us, right? And so herein lies the concern, because now we're reading these as policies when these are actually supposed to be admin regs based off of what this policy stated that we should be going back and doing. Making it a little bit confusing at times.
Well, 672.4 and 672.4 Rule 1, so.
Yeah, and oftentimes, resources that I often go to look at are other school districts. What policies do they have? And I happen to pull up Beloit Turner. They don't even have a policy on 672.4. Not to say that we have to follow any one, because I'm sure I could go to Evansville or Janesville or Stoughton, all the districts that I typically do, and I can find some. Sometimes you find districts that policy language aligns, and that often is the case when Neola is providing vendor assistance to you with policy development and administration, because they've got their base framework that they work from. But WASB can also provide examples, as well. And so, but again, if the desire is to merge it, we can merge it. No harm, no foul.
But your recommendation is to leave it there the way it is for now.
I would encourage the policy committee to look into the rule structure, and is that board-approved rules, or is that administrative guidelines and rules? And if it's administrative guidelines and rules, should it be reflected differently
Yeah.
in board docs, perhaps?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess that is a recommendation from Mr. Chady. I support that recommendation from Mr. Chady. I just need the board to understand that I think a greater conversation needs to happen.
Right.
Because if we look at Neola policies and see how they're doing them, are we going to start shifting rules into admin guidelines so that the board necessarily shouldn't have to, be involved in necessarily that, because we have to follow the policy. That's what policies give leverage to admin guidelines. So we can't be out of the policy. How we do it internally is up to us. But right now it's all into one big package, and that's what's making it a little bit confusing. I still encourage the board for us to have a greater discussion to determine that direction.
All right.
And in the meantime, we can keep these separate or put them together.
Okay.
So I did share with the committee members and Board President Johnson, WASB's policy coding manual that has the listing. And I did a quick Control F find on the word rule. So WASB has policy number 253.1, Development of Administrative Rules. And then I quickly went and looked in board docs at our policies, and of course, we have no 253 policy that associates with that. So
Development of what was it?
administrative rules.
Administrative rules, okay. 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 So we're just going to review. So review, we don't need to vote on, right? these are reviews, so. That's another question I have.
I know you're gonna ask.
So while you're here, you're the expert again. So we've got some policies that says last revised and last reviewed, and some don't have last reviewed. It's like,
It, yeah, they all should, right? Yeah.
I would think they would all be reviewed.
Wha-
Well, I mean, if we're supposed to do them every 3 years, give or take, then we should review them and either make no changes, and then if we revise them, they're revised, right? But so
Correct, but if a policy, okay, so say a policy's developed and
Yep,
approved.
right.
That's your adopted
Right,
date. But if that policy comes up for revision and hasn't been reviewed, it's not going to have a reviewed date.
no, okay.
It's just going to have a revised date.
Okay,
So that's why a policy may never have a reviewed date. Because reviewing is just looking at it and determining it doesn't need to be revised.
right,
And sometimes that's a board review, and sometimes that's an administrative review.
right. Well, this is an example. 672-4 was adopted November 25th, 1980, when I was a kid, and almost. Anyway, last revised March 26, 2013. Prior revised dates 1991. This will be the first review.
So yes, this would be the first time it was reviewed.
Okay.
Because it was developed in 80 and adopted.
Okay.
And then the next time it was looked at and revised was 1991.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, there was a reprint in 2000, which is a whole different ballgame, which means a title change, typos were found,
Okay.
something like that, something minor. But we don't use reprints anymore.
Okay. Okay. Let's move on. 672-5, protections and guarantees for construction and renovations. I looked at the changes and they looked
Odd?
good to me.
Okay.
I should,
Yeah, so the changes in the dollar values probably look odd as to where did administration come up with these weird ranges?
yeah, 16 and,
Right. Those ranges currently reflect the ranges that are found in the Department of Workforce Development's administrative code. So it ties back to state regulations, which at one point in time probably were the same values that we are editing and changing. And in fact, later in this policy, under item number 4, contracts exceeding 100 now sought at 148,000, I struck the as amended from time to time because I'm not sure that that's necessary. And then the following initial part of that last paragraph, the foregoing dollar limitations, et cetera, also struck as well.
okay.
It appeared to me that the administrative regs at one point in time were tied to amendment, but it doesn't look like that happens anymore. So it appeared to me that they changed almost on an annual basis, like an inflationary increase, and then that practice seemed to have stopped. So in any case, the dollar values that look a bit odd, why 148,000 and why not just 150,000? Because the 148 actually ties to the value that's in the administrative code with the DWD currently.
Okay. Okay, any discussion?
Levy noted some
Yes.
different numbers, and just for points, she said for number one, contracts less than 10,000. For number two, 10,000 to 75,000. So she just balanced the numbers, if that makes any sense. 74,000, 75,000 in C to 150,000. And then for contracts totaling 150,000 or greater. And so she just pretty much she rolled it down to go up and then started up to stay at a balanced number.
Right, but Committee Member Levy didn't have the knowledge or the logic of the connection back to the administrative code and why the numbers were presented as they were.
Right.
Yep.
That's what I was going to say. So. Okay. Could I get a motion to recommend to the board policy 672 for first reading with the changes that are made?
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 2-0. Six 672-6, there's no recommendations, so we'll just correct, or did you?
Well, actually, in reading through Committee Member Levy's comments, she noted kind of an oddity, and I tend to agree, and as I reread it, I think I even have a better proposal. So she notes that really at the end of the first sentence, it reads, the purchase of custodial and operational supplies to ensure the efficient operation of school plants.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I understood what they meant by that.
Yeah. But
Many people probably did. Committee Member Levy suggests school sites, which seems to be a little bit clearer, but I think maybe we even go another step and replace school plants with district facilities, because not all of our facilities are schools.
Right.
So,
operation of facilities?
yeah, I think, just if we replace school plants with district facilities, I think that meets Committee Member Levy's desires and perhaps is a little bit even more encompassing then.
Mr. Chady, is there any non-district owned facilities that this would apply to?
Purchasing custodial non-district owned facilities. I guess technically perhaps so. The district is responsible for custodial supplies at least during the spring when we utilize Telfer Park, the baseball field. I don't know if that applies to hockey and the use of the Edwards Ice Arena or not.
And that I was getting at, it says district
Right.
facilities.
Yep.
Okay, could I get a motion to move policy 672-6, purchasing custodial supplies, to the full board for first reading with the change noted by Mr. Chady and Mrs. Shope, you got that right? Okay.
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed, 2-0. Next item, 673, payment procedures.
So when I read through that policy, I wasn't confident that our current practice met the policy intention. So I struck a couple of sections there that perhaps bring us more in line with our current practice. In the past, when I started my career in school business 12 plus years ago, a good number of districts prior to the payment of checks or the issuance of checks would bring a check register listing before the board that the board would have to approve. Then the invoices were processed and paid, and then the checks remitted. That was done with paper checks because there wasn't a lot of people doing ACHs at the time. And it also posed challenges about various due dates of, some invoices came with a 30-day due date, some were less than that, so just some challenges with that. In my almost 2 years now in the school district of Beloit, the board gets notified of the expenditures, but they're all after the fact.
Right.
And I think, quite honestly, that's pretty much the norm throughout the state. So my strikes there were just trying to remove that question, I guess, from it. And we'll continue to provide, each month we'll continue to provide the expenditure report to the board. Currently, we're including that in the board's monthly financial report. Makes sense to me, but I do know that some members of the public didn't know where to look for that. It's been listed in a different portion of board docs in the past that they were referenced, so what do we want our practice to be going forward is another question as far as how to make that information publicly available as well.
Well, Board Member Levy addressed that. She said make sure the monthly full report, you read it, right? And it is available on Friday and thereafter on your agenda item for the Finance Committee and or the full board. So I think we're covered, aren't we?
Well, I think we're covered. I think some members of the public and former school board members are used to finding similar information in the board library portion of board docs.
Gotcha.
But there's nothing there. But yet I think we're being more transparent, to be honest,
Right.
in the Business, Finance, and Operations Committee agenda item
I agree.
than what had been in the past. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Any discussion, additional discussion? Board Member Hankins or Board President Johnson, do you have any comments on that? Okay,
No, I'm good.
Okay, sorry. Oh, you're good, okay. So I need a motion to move 673 payment procedures to the full board for first reading with the approved changes that the Business Operations Finance Office have put forth.
So moved.
I second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 2-0. Oh, sorry, I hit the button. Anyway, Policy 674, Emergency Procurement and Expenditure Authority. There are some changes that have been made on the amounts and a few wording changes. I'll open it up for discussion. Board Member Hankins, do you have any comments on the noted changes?
I'd just like to hear from Mr. Chady an explanation of the changes. That would probably clarify everything for me.
Sure. So again, this policy deals with emergency procurement in expenses. And really, this policy is going to come into play. There's probably two unique circumstances that come to my mind when this policy is going to come into play. One might be a tornado, a significant tornado weather event that comes through the school district and perhaps impacts a building, 2 or 3. or if we have a fire, a significant fire at a building. In either of those two instances, the Emergency Operations Center for the district is going to be activated, and we're going to gather a team of people that are going to need to have the authority to do what they need to do to protect what remaining asset there is, physical property, and life of staff and students. So first and foremost, the policy language as it states today says that it only authorizes the superintendent to be able to have this authority. I strongly suggest that we add some designees to that as well, because the superintendent may not be available, may not be reachable for whatever reason, and then you're kind of handcuffed. Also advocating that we increase the amount from $150,000 to $350,000, and I know that that's a $200,000 jump. But I think it's really important that in the event that any of these types of situations occur, that the team that you have assembled has the authority to spend up to that amount to mitigate continued loss and to protect the assets that we have. And, certainly we can sit here and talk about, okay, so we have a tornado that comes through and it's over $150,000. Efforts ought to be made to reach out to the board, certainly. But a tornado of that size is going to impact many of the board members as well. And your availability may be constrained as well. We may not be able to reach you. We may not be able to get the board together. So, my logic was that $150,000 came into being apparently in 2002, maybe even in 2013. I don't know. That just seems a little bit low. If the board's more, I think it ought to be greater than 150. If the board's more comfortable with 250, but more importantly, I think that we have to, in the event that such a situation occurs, we want to control, but yet we also need to trust the team that's there to do what they need to do to shore up roofing, address whatever the issue is.
Mr. Shady, what's on our building, what's our deductible?
I'm not sure what our deductible is off the top of my head. Great question, but keep in mind, so, certainly you immediately go to insurance, right? Yep. Insurance doesn't write you the check the night of the incident.
Right, and I'm following that logic.
Right, that they reimburse you weeks and months later.
You spend it.
But yet, when these instances occur, we need to be able to respond to, again, limit our loss at the then and there.
But just as a ballpark, what are deductibles at now on buildings of that size, like Beloit Memorial? Just a ballpark. I know this doesn't have to do with that, but
If I recall correctly, I think it's $75,000 per incident.
have you ever had to deal with FEMA? And they're kind of the same way. They come through and might grant you a loan that you got to repay, or you got to go through, in a catastrophic thing like that. Have you ever had to deal with FEMA? I know I'm getting off track, but
Yeah, no, I did actually look at FEMA. Funny, this came up in a discussion among school business officials today. I did look at that for an issue that occurred in a prior district, and I have had colleagues in other districts work through FEMA for such instances as well. Challenging, can provide some reimbursements, but again, those reimbursements come
no.
months and years after the event.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just for my own general knowledge.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Chady, I know Board Member Levy put in her notes, she thinks it should remain at 150. I think I would be more comfortable if we were at 250, as you alluded to. I think that's kind of.
I'm fine with that as well.
Okay.
I understand, it's that fine balance, right, of to what authority do you provide the superintendent or the designee to respond to such situations, to mitigate that loss, to start remedying it in the short term?
Yeah.
You know, insurance will come into play for these instances, but that insurance and the reimbursement, you know,
Oh, yeah.
a roof's gone on Aldrich as an example because of a tornado. Our insurance company doesn't show up and put a new roof on the next night. You know, we got to somehow, yeah.
I know. Well, I use California today for an example of what, there's schools gone in a
Yep.
heartbeat.
Snap
house
of a
gone.
finger, right? Yep,
Nothing's going to happen
yep.
for a while. So I think I'm good with everything else, except I think we should change it to 250, from 150 to 250.
I, on this one, defer to Mr. Chady. If he's okay with 250, I am.
250 is better than 150. 350 is better than 250, but, you know, more importantly, I think the 150 is just a little too tight.
Yeah.
God forbid we ever have to use this policy to begin with, but if we do, I think we need to make sure that the individuals that are involved in attending to that situation at that time have the authority to do what they need to do before we have to start chasing down the board with regards to, you know, permission to exceed and scheduling an emergency meeting in a 2-hour window and, you know,
Sure.
so.
Yep. Okay. Board President Johnson, do you have any comments or? No? Okay. Well, I move that we move this policy to the full board for approval with the only change being to change 350 to 250, and then I would say the same thing in the next paragraph, not to exceed the $250,000 amount. But I'm good with all the designees and everything else. Does that make sense, Mrs. Shope?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a question, the designee, is that specified somewhere? Who-
I will assign the
Is that-
designee.
you
In
would?
most cases, in these situations, I would just say, Mr. Chady, you're the designee for this situation. If it's something else, I would say blank is the next designee. And
You wouldn't put me on that list?
Yes, I would put you on that list, Mr. Hankins, because you're part of the board.
Well, you are pretty close. You could be here
I can't take
soon.
you off the list because you're on the board. Yes, you will be on that list.
Way down.
Way down. No, not way down. The other thought to that, and I didn't say anything during the conversations because I also agree with the changes, and I was going to be fine with the number there as well. In the event of an emergency, the board does need to understand the superintendent will act in what's in best interest of the students and the families.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's what he or she will do. Now, we're talking about a catastrophic event, but there could be other events that happen that, you know, that probably won't come up to $250,000, that the superintendent typically will act in what's in best interest of the families and the students, and then we'll come back and have those conversations at the board level. I haven't seen a superintendent get in too much trouble by doing what's right for students and families in certain emergency situations. And so, duly noted, we will always try to work through it, but a board president and the board to kind of let people know what's happening. But just want to make sure you all know that we will continue in case of something like this does happen, because we are in the district. Yeah, so.
So just to share with you, the district does drill on these types of events annually. This past summer was my first time being trained and able to participate in that. During the drill, even before we knew what the issue was, my having knowledge of this policy, we reached out to the superintendent, who wasn't Dr. Garrison in the drill, it was somebody else, for authority to exercise this policy, to have that $150,000 authority and available to us right away. Not even knowing what the issue was, but just being proactive.
And as I think it through, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chady, if something were to happen like this, and you are a designee, or, you know, if Dr. Garrison isn't available, let's say this happened, and you need to get some work done very soon, would a a contractor kind of asks, do you have permission to, not to say give you a check for $250, but they will want to know that you have the authority to okay this on the spot?
Likely so. Some contractors will require a purchase order or some sort of written commitment to them. Some may require a credit card number to hold. Yeah.
It's just good to have in your back pocket.
Yep. And also keep in mind, we'll go back to the tornado situation because perhaps that's the most likely, but hopefully, again, it never happens. The district's wide and broad, right? It could impact 1, 2, 3 of our facilities and perhaps some of our board members and our families' homes. If I'm at home in Fort Atkinson and I need to make my way to Beloit to help respond to something, I may have issues in trying to get here myself. Perhaps Tommy Bricko, our director of facilities, who lives nearby, but it may impact him too. So while the designee may be myself, it may end up being somebody else too for a period of time.
Which leads me to another question. Let's say it is a tornado and it wipes out 3 or 4 of our buildings. Does the 250 times 3 then, or 2, does that
Not to
multiply
exceed,
that out?
It's not to exceed 200.
But it's a one,
One event, yep.
Yeah.
just one
I would interpret it as for that event.
for that event. Thank you.
Yep.
Right, one event, yep.
Thank you.
Well, just my suggestion.
Just as a suggestion, do you have I have a question, and then, do you have a list in order of who you would?
So that's a great question. Do we have a list? I typically look at situations a little different based off of the emergency. And most of these situations I'd have to work through, the business operations and finance committee.
Right.
But as it pertains to my immediate designee, which is my number 2, which would be Teresa Mortek. But in that case, I would tell Teresa Mortek to tell Mr. Chady to authorize blank. Regardless, these conversations have to start or at some point come through the superintendent. Mr. Chady is not going to just arbitrarily write away a $250,000 check without telling Dr. Garrison that he's going to write away $250,000.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the situation. Yeah.
A suggestion there might be that the superintendent may want to provide that authority to the finance and administration position on the Emergency Operations Center. These positions change by personnel daily based upon who's in district and who's out of district in case we have to implement the EOC. But so long as that position is the designee,
Yeah.
then whoever's in the room always has that authority.
Good. Okay, well, I need a motion to move this policy to the full board did I already do that?
Point of order, you made the motion,
I made the motion,
and I thought Tom seconded it.
yeah. Did you, Did you,
Did I second? I'm not sure.
did
Did
you?
I?
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Aye. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried 2-0. Okay. The one we've been looking for, the last one. Policy 683, inventories. I see the 10,000 is because of the federal guidance, right?
Yeah,
So-
the feds literally probably within the last 6 to 8 months or so increased the value that they require for inventory purposes from 5,000 to 10,000. So timing is what timing is, and since they recently increased and we're going through, technically, if you look at the policy number 683, it's not part of the 670 series,
Right.
but because we were bringing all these other finance policies, I don't want to say we snuck it in, but we included it because of that change.
No, I noticed that, but I thought, well, I think it's a good idea to do this one.
Right. And then please take note of the last paragraph under the direction of the Executive Director of Business Services or designee. A complete physical inventory of all district property will be undertaken at least once every 3 years. I've stricken that. That seems to be kind of onerous. And there are vendors that we can contract with to come in and do that, but that would be expensive too. So,
So an inventory has never been done at Beloit, at the school district of Beloit facilities?
well, I can only speak to the last 20 or so months,
Okay,
not in my time.
okay. Mrs. Shope, do you have any history of that? There's never been one?
No, there's been inventories done.
Okay.
We've had people come in and they would, in the old building, there was a tag on the door, and then they
Yes.
would come in and they'd
Right.
start clicking on all the tags on all
Yes.
of like our
Yeah.
computers
No.
and stuff worth value.
Yeah.
I haven't done an inventories over the entire district since I've been here, and again, this is my second year.
Right.
I think this is a very big task for our school district. However, I do believe we should be doing it. I know it's stricken through. I guess, Mr. Chady, we talked about, this being a real hard thing to accomplish, and then very costly as well. And I'm, like I said, I'm dealing with a lot of different costs in general. I didn't ask you, what would be a cost for something like this?
For the school district of Beloit, based upon my past experiences, to do all of our facilities, it's probably in the six figures. I would say it's probably $100,000 or more.
And that, when I talk about big ticket stuff, because that's what I look at a lot, trying to figure out where we're gonna save money. Some of our policies, we just, we wanna do these things, but we gotta have the money to do them. And then if I'm gonna take $100,000 to count stuff versus put it in the classroom, I'm gonna choose put it in the classroom. That's what I'm gonna choose, but then I'm out of compliance with the policy. So I go back and forth on this one. Mr. Nichols, you have a tough decision to make.
I'm just not sure what the benefit of it is. Yeah, I mean, other than theft,
It
but
does say things of value of over 10,000, and I'm not sure how much we have that's over 10,000, but we probably have a lot of stuff over 10,000, but when you're talking about
Yes.
10 buildings,
But it doesn't apply to over 10,000. It applies to all district property.
correct.
So you're talking about how many chairs are in every classroom, what style of chair, and again, I go back to what is the benefit of doing it, versus what the cost is. The only benefit is, are we losing stuff? Are assets walking out the door through theft or some other means? Or from insurance purposes, but our insurance carrier is not asking us to do this.
Correct. So from a cost, I want to make sure that's brought into this conversation. Mr. Chady thinks that it could be easily in the six figures. I didn't know that cost. That's why I'm asking the question now. That's something that we need to discuss here.
Well, I guess my question is, well, there's an inventory tag right there. So, bear with me, and we're talking apples and oranges, but I managed a facility in California that produced millions of gallons of oil a year, from big tanks to little bottles, and we inventoried once a month, and we double counted it once a month, and then auditors would check it, would come through once a year and do an audit on it. So I guess the question back, that reminded me, Bob, have our auditors never mentioned or requested inventory records?
The auditors look at our fixed assets, which are items that were originally purchased at either the $5,000 or now would be the $10,000 threshold and above.
Okay.
So those items are tracked.
Okay.
But again, coming back to the policy, it says all physical property, all district property, all. So it's not tied to any dollar value in that paragraph. The prior paragraph just says that an inventory shall be taken at least every 2 years on property purchased with federal funds with a unit value of $10,000 or more.
Right.
And through our fixed asset process with our audit firm, we track all purchases of $10,000 or more for goods. Yep.
Okay.
Then we got to update it when goods are removed from service and new things are brought into service. Yeah, it's a challenge, but we get through it.
Well, I'm not sure. I have a firm answer right now. Again, in my career, there was inventories were done all the time, and I know it's different business, but yeah, I think you mentioned the word, Mr. Shady, and you hate to say it. Things get lost and things get misplaced and things get sometimes inadvertently picked up and sometimes they're purposely picked up. But I would think that we would want to know, I'm not so sure that, you want to go through and do every blind in the windows and some of that sort of thing. But what I read is district-owned furniture, equipment, and materials. So, I don't know. Mr. Hankins, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. We talk about insurance and its replacement values. Is what I hear in my personal, when I had insurance on my business and properties, and it was a very simple thing, and it's gotten easier today to go around and do videos. Insurance companies accept that. It's time dated. It shows, a guy walking through a camera, and I don't think it has to be as taskful as it was at one time for the guy with a calculator walking around how many desks are in a room. So I just want to offer that in. I'm not saying that has to be done every 3 years, but I'm wondering at what, of course, auditors or insurance company. I'm told by my insurance carriers, if you want to protect yourself even in your own home, you better know what's in there, because you can't raise the flag after it burns. And we're talking about catastrophic experiences today, and so there is that. The other part I want to bring up, and this isn't part of this, but it is. I've been a proponent of getting inventory of our unused or not using stuff. And I know we have several buildings with a lot of equipment, trucks, food trucks, high ticket value, tables and chairs, all that stuff that we keep moving around, and we have moved. And I know I've talked to Mr. Chady, and I've talked to Tommy, and I've talked to Dr. Garrison about it. Sooner or later, we're going to have to downsize and get rid of that. But that's a different area, and I know that, but I just wanted to throw that in there as long as we're talking about inventory. Because it's all in the realm, we need to know. I think the district it's good knowledge. Yes, it's expensive. But, if we did have this tornado or fire and we had to replace everything, who's going to put the value on it? I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not trying to stand up and jump up and down about it, but I think it's all good conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Board Member Hankins. Yeah, if there's an incident, then I would think that the insurance company's going to want to know numbers for replacement and replacement value. Board President Johnson, you have comments?
I'm wondering, Mr. Chady, how would you feel about changing the parameters of this? So maybe instead of once every 3 years, once every 5 years for equipment or supplies, whatever, above X dollars amounts. That way it would satisfy Mr. Hankins' concern of if something does happen with the insurance, then we've got a record.
So while you were speaking, my note right here, check with Keith at Tricor regarding the replacement value of contents and inventory. So let's check with our insurance broker. If an incident occurs, how do we justify, is the insurance company going to request something, first and foremost? Going from 3 to 5, sure, but I'm not really sure that it makes sense. Because especially if the intent is to identify loss of assets, you don't identify it for another 2 years. We can adopt the policy without that stricken for now. We can always come back to the policy committee in the future. I mean, that gives us time to look at other districts, look at WASB sample policy language and see what they say. Reach out to the insurance broker to get guidance from them, talk to the auditors even about guidance from them. And then it can come back at some point in time in the future as well. But just, putting it out there, the all district property, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pretty significant expense. And as the policy language is currently written, we'd have to undergo that process within the next 14 months. So.
I'm okay with leaving it, but going back to review, I think it's excellent that Mr. Cheney brought up that we go to those resources and see what WASB says, but more primarily, what does Tricor say, and how often would they want to be, if they're asking for not a perfect world, but is 5 years, I just think we need more information before we strike it. But we can always bring it back and strike it, so I'd like to defer on the side of caution a little bit here.
Yeah. Dr. Garrison?
Yes, I think a good recommendation would be that we hold this policy over until we are able to get some more questions answered.
I would suggest that we don't hold it because I think we still want to adopt the $10,000 increase instead of the 5.
But
Because
the bottom
that
portion is still.
Right, the bottom portion, I think we just leave as is.
We'll leave it in.
Leave it in the policy for now,
But then it'll have to come back if something changes.
and
I
that's
just want to
okay.
make sure that's okay. Okay, all right.
And again, it's about bringing policies forward to the policy committee that are timely and need, there's a lot of logic in reviewing policies en masse, looking at all your 670s, all your purchasing policies. But we may be looking at all the 670s in purchasing or focusing on the finance policies, but it might make perfect sense to revise a Board of Education policy because committees don't start at 5:30 anymore. Now they start at 5, but the policy says they start at 5:30 or even 6. So,
I just want to make sure that the full board is aware of that this may be a seesaw.
No, I
Space,
understand. Yeah, I understand, but I think the recommendation to leave the last paragraph on there and leave the 10,000, or change it to 5 to 10,000, and bring it back when you find more information out, see what we can do or not do, and what's required. Michelle, did you understand all that? Well, we got to vote on it, but. So we're going to make the change on the 10, from 5 to 10,000, but
Right.
the last paragraph we're going to leave in.
Okay, yep, that I got.
Assuming that the committee votes that way.
Okay.
Okay. So can I get a motion to move this policy 683 to the full board for first reading with the changes noted?
So moved.
I second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 2-0. Okay, next meeting date will be Wednesday, February the 5th at 5:30 PM. And could I get a motion to adjourn?
I just wanted to make a brief comment. I just want to thank Mr. Chady and Dr. Garrison. I think it's very timely that you brought up WASB and the number of different resources we can look to. And it's very timely because we are going to state convention in a couple of weeks. So maybe, Brian, you and I could,
I'm not going to be there.
maybe I'll just go myself. I'm just kidding. But anyways, if I can research or look somebody up to get, and I'll get with Mr. Chady prior to and maybe get some knowledge from them and what, firsthand knowledge from talking to a person there. But I do appreciate guiding us to use the resources at hand that we do have. We don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. So I just want to say thank you to both of you.
Good point. I agree. We do have a lot of resources sometimes we just don't think about. So anyway, could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 7:30. Thank you, everybody.
2-hour limit.